All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to have a broad overview as we're heading into the legislative year, starting in January. Bills have already started to pre-file. So, James and I, hello, I'm Tyler. That's James. We're here today to give you a little overview of how the process works.
Next slide, please. Here we go. So I'll kind of do the initial introductory slide here. Renew Missouri, in case you don't know, is a 501c3 dedicated to transforming Missouri into a leading state for renewable energy and energy efficiency. Largely, we do this through community empowerment and collaboration, as well as legislative and regulatory advocacy, which is a fancy word, a fancy phrase for saying we're in the Capitol. We work in the Capitol. We work with lawmakers. Um, we work with other parties, and that's kind of how we achieve that mission, among other ways. Yeah. So if you're thinking about giving a donation, just remember it's tax exempt. So, next slide, please. There we go. So let me introduce myself first in case I need any introduction. James Owen, I'm the executive director of Renew Missouri. I have had that role for almost over 7.5 years now, which is hard to imagine. I was I guess, is it former director? Was I former director? I was former public counsel, which is the person who runs the Office of Public Counsel, which is the ratepayer advocate for the state of Missouri. It lists that I was a former associate municipal judge. I was also a former associate circuit judge, but that was a long time ago. But I was a judge in Columbia as well as Webster County, Missouri. So, you know that it's official if it's coming from me. Tyler?
And good afternoon, everybody. My name's Tyler Travers. I'm a policy director here at Renew Missouri. Before that, I worked 6 legislative sessions in the Capitol, 2 in the House, 4 in the Senate. I eventually was chief of staff to the senator from the 7th district, which encompasses a lot of Kansas City, Missouri. And during those 6 years, I've tracked thousands of bills. I've helped to pass a handful and helped to kill a handful. And it's a really intricate process I'm happy to talk to you all about today.
And yes, if you do have any questions, please drop them in the chat, or yeah, don't chant them at us, or raise your hand during the presentation. We will have a Q&A at the end as well. Just so you know, this is listed as an hour, but because it's a CLE, we have a therapist hour, which is only 50 minutes. So since we started at 12:03, we're going to try to wrap this up by 12:55. Uh, and so if you don't get to your question today, or you think of it later, we have our email addresses down there. It's our first names at renewmo.org. So next slide.
All right, so this is a brief overview of our legislative session. And what session is when our lawmakers meet in Jefferson City. That's the only time that bills can become laws. And our session is about 4.5 months from January to mid-May. Sessions vary from state to state, so you'll see some states have almost year-long sessions, and I don't envy those workers there. But some sessions in some states can only be a month long. So you'll see here the pre-filing has already opened in Missouri. So lawmakers have already filed dozens, actually hundreds of bills. And you can go to house.mo.gov or senate.mo.gov to read those if you're really bored. But those are all online already. And then session will begin here January 8th. Bills can still be filed until March. Session wraps up in mid-May. And then the governor can veto bills until the summer, at which point lawmakers come back to Jefferson City for a week for what's called veto session. So that's a broad overview of what our session is here in Missouri.
So Tyler,
Yep.
the it's interesting. I don't know if we get into this in other slides, but you talk about the veto session. and the final day for vetoing bills. With your legislative experience, I mean, right now, there's what we call a veto-proof majority for the Republican Party in the legislature. Can you kind of explain maybe what that means and what that has effect on us in terms of vetoes?
Yeah, so absolutely. Here in Missouri, we have a trifecta state where one party, the Republican majority, controls the two chambers of the legislature and the governorship. So you need a veto-proof majority um, to not have your bills overridden once they've passed the legislature. So, say a Republican majority passes a bill in the House and the Senate, it goes to the governor. If he or she, the governor, does veto a bill, it goes back to the legislature. And if they can get two-thirds of each chamber to vote to override a veto, then that governor's veto is null and void. But because the legislature's partisanship lines up with our governor right now, they're both Republicans. They don't have too much worries of vetoes or overriding any vetoes that incoming Governor Kehoe might have.
Uh, yeah, important to know because I mean, it just seems like I mean, historically or in like recent history, I mean, past couple of years, there's not been a whole lot of legislation that's passed
Mhm.
both chambers, and so there's not really a whole lot of opportunity for vetoes. But every once in a while, you will see a veto.
You'll certainly see vetoes, and a lot of people don't want to, cause a ruckus with the leader of their party, who's de facto the governor. So if the governor decides to veto something, you probably don't even see an attempt to override any of those seriously.
Yeah. Well, it's just one I think of that was of particular interest to Renew Missouri, and because it's kind of an issue involving a pretty large utility customer was the Mag 7 Metals plant a couple of years
Mm.
ago was trying to get a loan from the state of Missouri to make some improvements to its facility. That was in a bill, that was in a piece of legislation. I think it was part of the budget. In fact, I think it was an appropriation bill. And Governor Parson, who is still the governor until when do we say when's the swearing in? Is that
Swearing
January
in, I think it's January 13th for the governor of
January
that
13th?
week.
Right. And so he'll be governor until then, till
Yep.
noon on that day. He had vetoed that particular Mag 7 Metals loan, citing a concern that the Constitution did not allow the state to give out loans to private parties. Uh, that's just one that's an example, just so
Yes.
everyone wants to have like a real tangible example of what a veto could look like. So anyway,
Yes. And I've got a little slide later where we can talk about vetoes a little bit more if we'd like to at that point.
great. All
All
right.
right, Tori, I think we're ready for the next one. So, bill filing, and I was told earlier that I might need to explain what a bill is first, so I'll do that. So, a bill is a piece of legislation written out that is attempting to change our current law. So, here today we're talking about state law, state statutes. And so, any legislator, a state representative, or a state senator can file a bill. A bill can change any part of our state provisions, whether that be related to education, transportation. We have budget bills that fund our public safety, corrections, teachers. Our state law encompasses so many things, and you could really have a countless number of things you could write a bill about. So, bill filing, pre-filing started in December. A bunch of bills have already been filed by legislators. And when legislators come up with an idea that they'd like to file a bill, they go to their respective research offices, which have a whole host of expert attorneys who will help them to write a bill. And these attorneys are sorted by expertise, whether it be education or energy or so on. A lot of language for bills is copy and pasted from previous year's bills, so that takes out a lot of the work. But a lot of it's just copy and pasted from other states. You see some from think tanks or lobbyists who have language for clients that are shopping it around to see what legislators might be interested in carrying those provisions. And then, of course, brand new ideas that a legislator may come up with. When I worked in the Capitol, we would get emails and calls from constituents saying, "Hey, this is happening in my neighborhood. What can we do in state law to address it?" And we had a couple bills that had never been written before that I worked with constituents to have written, and we filed those bills. So that is a broad overview of the bill filing. You can continue to file new bills until March, and then there's a deadline. So that is step one in the process is bill filing.
And so, yeah, so I mean, so when people talk about sponsoring a bill or what, I mean, is there usually just like one sponsor on a bill? I know you always hear at the federal level about like, oh, this has like 20 co-sponsors, but you don't ever really see that in Missouri. I've never seen that in Missouri. It's usually got one sponsor, right?
Right. So you'll see a lot of identical bills. So in years past, say for example, we passed the General Assembly passed a bunch of provisions a couple years ago related to transgender sports athletes. There was copy and pasted language filed by five or six senators with a little variations in between, and they each have their own bill. Senators and representatives as well can choose to co-sponsor bills, so they're just attaching their name to the end of it. But when
Uh,
I was in the Senate, senators were advised against doing that because once you attach your name as a co-sponsor, you're endorsing that legislation no matter what it becomes later on. So if you endorse a very
oh,
small bill with your co-sponsorship and then it blows up, you might not want your name attached to the rest of the provisions that have been added. And I know
uh,
it's probably similar in the House. You can co-sponsor bills as well.
and at least with when you have one sponsor, they have a little bit of control over what gets added to it and what doesn't, isn't it? I don't know if it's a rule or a law. But I mean, it's kind of just like they have to okay it, don't they? Or don't they usually okay it if someone wants to add something to their bill?
So the bill, when it's originally filed, that sponsor, that representative, that senator, they control it completely. They can change anything before it is put into the system as filed. But once it goes to a committee or once it gets to the floor, it's kind of out of their hands where if anyone wants to add
Oh,
an amendment, they can do that. If a chairperson of a committee wants to make a committee substitute and completely change your bill, they can kind of just do that without your permission.
hmm.
You could choose to slow it down and not, put your full effort behind it once it's diluted down, but many people can influence your bill after you put your name on it.
Okay, because I've heard about lawmakers refusing to add stuff to bills or like wanting to strip things off when it's been added. So I've always heard that. I wasn't sure if that was just a courtesy or if that was something that was more formal. I wasn't entirely sure.
It varies from step to step. So, for example, we can get more into this when we get to perfection, but once a
Yeah.
bill gets to the Senate floor, that sponsor can rewrite it all and a Senate substitute, and that's in their control. But
Okay.
then a senator can add it as an amendment later on, even if they don't like it. So, it's
Okay.
an interesting dynamic there for sure.
Okay. Very good. Just curious. I'm learning with everyone else.
Yeah, there's much to it. So here, after your bill's been filed, the first thing you want your bill to go through is the committee process. And before your bill can be heard in a committee, it's first has to be referred to a committee. And that varies from chamber to chamber. In the House of Representatives, the Speaker of the House can refer any bill to any committee at any time during session. So, and the Speaker also picks the chairs of the committees and the composition of the committees. So, if the chair wants to send a road bill to the Transportation Committee, that's pretty cut and dry. If the chair wants to, or if the Speaker, excuse me, wants to send a controversial bill that he or she is really invested in to a specific committee that they have set up, they can do that. Um, and you'll see a lot of bills held up and not referred to committee until the very last day of session. So they are essentially dead. You'll see a lot of minority member bills referred on the very last day of session. They'll never have a hearing because of this. And this is just an example of the levers of power at each step, where, especially in the House of Representatives, it is so top heavy, where the Speaker of the House can really, really slow things down and essentially kill legislation if he or she likes to.
Hmm.
And then in the Senate, it is different in that bills have to be referred in number order. So bill number 100 cannot be referred until bills numbered 1 through 99 have been referred. So you're much more likely to get a hearing in the Senate as everyone wants their bills referred. So you can't get to 101, so you get to 100. The Senate President pro tem refers bills to committee. So he or she does choose what committee they go to. Um, the lever of power there is how fast do you refer bills? Do you refer 5 bills a week? Do you refer 100 bills a week? So you can speed it up or slow it down as things go based on how session is going, how the president pro tem would like to do that. So that is where you're in the Senate, and senators are sort of their own island of power, a little bit more equal than in the House where it's top heavy. So I know that was a lot. You got any points there, James?
Oh. Well, no, I was thinking a little bit about the Senate. I mean, and I think maybe you talk about this in a future slide, so I don't want to jump ahead, but
Sure.
it is really important, like when you filed your bill, that's why pre-filing is so important, is because the higher your bill number, the more likely it is it's going to get referred, it's going to be sent to a committee, it's got to be kind of handled. I mean, um, especially that's important in the Senate. I was thinking about the fact that in the Senate right now, I believe it's Senate Bill 4, 5, and 6 are utility related bills,
Yes.
all sponsored by the chair of the Senate Energy Committee. Or I should
Yes.
say the Senate, what is it? The Senate Energy, Environment, and Consumer Protection Committee. I always just call it the Senate Energy Committee, but it's like three different subjects.
Sure.
Uh, but that's where most of the utility bills go. And it's just what I'm telling people is, well, if you really want to know what you should be paying attention to, I'd pay attention to those three bills because they're going to get a
Yep.
really early start, right?
So I'll say the you're right. The earlier your number is, so 123 versus 300, 301, 303.
Yeah.
Those are showing an example of your priorities. Each senator, I'll give you a little behind the scenes.
Oh, okay.
Each senator gets 3 priority bills each year, and they are filed in order of seniority. So someone's one bills 1, 2, 3 comes from a senator. Bills 4, 5, 6 come from a senator, and then they are filed in order of seniority. So your first 3 bills, if you want an early hearing, you should pick your priority bills to be filed first because they will be referred earlier. Bills 500, 501. I would say those don't get hearings until spring break or after, if you're lucky, based on the speed of things. But after your first 3 priority bills, bills continue to be referred in a first come, first served basis. So speed is key. Filing early is key, especially in the Senate.
Hmm. And since you mentioned spring break, I mean, you always hear this. Again, it's not a hard and fast rule, but um, if a bill doesn't have a hearing before spring break, it it doesn't have a lot of chance of success. If it's even better, or it's got more of a chance of success if one chamber has voted for it. I know you're going to get to the votes in each chamber in a minute,
Mhm.
but there is that kind of timetable that is not like written down anywhere, but it is certainly something that if you work in that building or you follow things in that building, it's important to know. I have people say like, "Oh my gosh, this bill is so bad. What's going to happen with this bill?"
You're right.
Oh, it's being heard in April.
Mhm.
I'm not very worried about that bill.
Yep. No, time is gold. And I had constituent calls as well. Should I be worried about this bill? And I'll look it up on the website and see where it's at. And if it's not even in a committee, if it hasn't had a hearing or a vote in committee, or if it hasn't passed a chamber by, April, mid-April, I tell them no promises, but this is how it works. We shouldn't be as concerned about this bill versus a bill that has already passed a chamber by this time. Because you run
Right.
out of time in 4.5 months. It does fly by, and there's a whole week taken out by spring break.
Right. Yeah. That was just kind of that. Those are kind of things that were on my mind as far as the color commentary I'm trying to offer here. So,
Yeah, no, absolutely.
okay.
Um, James and Tyler, we have a question, a relevant
Oh,
one. How are
yes.
committees chosen and how are the committee
Ooh,
members chosen?
that's a good
Yes,
question.
good question. So in the House of Representatives, the Speaker of the House uh, picks how many committees there are, what they're called, whether they're called the Government Efficiency Committee or the Committee on Government Downsizing. He or she, the Speaker of the House, handpicks the chairs of each committee. And it is similar in the Senate, where the Senate President pro tem, he or she picks what committees there are, what they're called, and who the chair is. So that is a role for the top dog in each chamber, the President pro tem in the Senate, and the Speaker of the House in the House.
Hmm. And I mean, but I mean, do people put their name in the running for stuff like that? Do they give a preference for what they want to do?
Good question. Not necessarily. Those are more so behind the scenes talks. If I were a senior Republican in the House right now, I would be talking to, who's going to be the speaker, probably Speaker John Patterson. I would be saying, hey, I've been on Transportation Committee for so many years. I know my policy from front to back. I would like to be chair. Those are kind of private conversations you lobby for on yourself.
Right. But there's no like, but there's nothing that says like this person has to be considered for this or that or whatever.
No, not at all. It's all
Okay.
unwritten.
Yeah. Um, but I have to imagine because like on the judiciary, and I know, I mean, don't they prefer people who are lawyers or have some background in legal work if they're going to
Sure.
be doing certain committee work? Is there certain things that people are looking for sometimes?
Sure. So I will say it's all up to the discretion of the leader of your chamber, but you will give, a list to them, say, ranking your top 5 committees you'd like to be on. I worked for a Democrat. There were not many Democrats, so we were spread thin. I'm sure it's
Yeah.
much different for the majority where you are vying to get on a committee. Meanwhile, for the minority party, you just have to be spread thin and be on so many committees. Um, but yes, you'll give a ranking of your preferences and say you're a lawyer, you should probably be on the Judiciary Committee. If you were a doctor or health professional of some sort, you should probably be on the Health Committee. If you're a teacher, you should probably be on the Education Committee because that's your bread and butter. You know what you're talking about. We need experts there. So they do rank them by expertise there. You'll see a lot of farmers on the Ag Committee and so on.
Mm, got it. Okay. I hope that helped answer that question. So
All right,
let's
next
move
slide.
on. There we go.
So once your bill has been referred to a committee, that is where you present it to the public for the first time ever. And in order to have a hearing, the power shifts to the chair of the committee. So the chairman or the chairwoman of transportation or education, they choose when or if you ever get a hearing, if you are a sponsor. So if you have a sponsored bill in someone's committee, you should be going to them privately saying, I would please like to have a hearing on my bill 1, 2, 3. It deals with this, and I believe it's a good idea. Once the chair agrees to let you have a hearing, you will go and present it to committee like this picture here. This is Representative Lane Roberts
Hmm.
presenting a bill in a House committee. At the hearing, it is public. It is streamed online as well. The public can come and testify in favor or in opposition or to give information. And also, you'll see lobbyists come in for clients as well. Business interest, stakeholders will come and testify after the sponsor has described what the bill does. And then after the hearing, typically at least a week later, the power shifts back to the chair on whether or not your bill gets a vote in committee. Uh, and then they'll vote up or down to move it out of the committee. So that is a quick explanation of the process there. It's a lot of what you see on TV, but not as glamorous as Washington, D.C. here in Missouri with some of those committee hearings.
Hmm. So like I mean, and this is important, and I kind of want to emphasize this, especially since we were kind of wanting to do this CLE, this webinar in conjunction with our advocacy conference that we did back in October. If you care about a subject, if you care about a bill, one way or another, if you are in favor of it or you're opposed to it, if you really want to go that extra step, I mean, you can talk to your representative, you can talk to your senator, but if you really want to leave an imprint on your feeling about a bill, this point when they have the hearing is when you should come to Jefferson City and testify in favor or opposition. I'll give you an example. Right now, in the legislature, there is a bill, and this was just filed this week. This might be new to some folks that are listening to this. There's a bill that would create a discount for low income customers for utility bills. Like right now, we cannot do what's called discriminatory practices. We can't charge certain customers differently, either more or less under the law. Like, I mean, there's different classes of customers, like industrial customers and that sort of thing. But like if you're a low income customer, you don't get a discount. But there is a bill filed by Senator Tracy McCreary, who is from St. Louis County. She has filed a bill that would allow for that. There will probably be a lot of people that are on this webinar today who might like that idea, who might think that's a good idea, who might work with low-income customers who are struggling with their bills. Well, if that ever gets a hearing, and I don't know if it's going to get a hearing or not, but whenever you get a hearing for that, you should show up and at least come there and present written testimony to say, I'm in favor of this. I think this is a good idea. That leaves a big impression when quote unquote regular people, not lobbyists, not special interest entities like Renew Missouri, when they come and they speak on something, that really resonates with lawmakers when you come to talk. So just putting that out there. And here's the other problem too. Sometimes, and Tyler, you can correct me if I'm wrong about this. Sometimes we don't get a lot of notice on when a bill is going to be heard. It is required to have about 24 hours notice. Although I'll tell you, sometimes that doesn't even happen. But usually you only get about 24 hours notice. Sometimes you get a little more. Oh, good question, Irene. Let me look that up. What's the number on that bill? I actually have it pulled up here. See if I can find it. It's going to give me a second. It is
So that is Senate Bill 401.
Senate Bill 401. 401. Very low. Very high. I guess I should say very high number, not very low on the list.
So I'll co-sign all that James just said there. The public hearing in the House and in the Senate, those are the only two instances where the public is allowed to give input. In public, it's all streamed. They have to sit and listen to what you have to say. So if you have a personal story related to something, that's going to resonate versus, an email or seeing your face and putting a name to the face, a name to the story, that really can go a long way. And as far as the notice goes, you're right. Sometimes we get 24 hours notice. Sometimes they skirt those lines where they really don't want people to come. So then they'll notice up super quickly in the middle of a snowstorm, which is really unfortunate. But we're really appreciative of people who can show up short notice and give public input.
Yeah, I remember having to drive through a snowstorm just to testify on a bill, and they didn't even get to me. I was thrilled. It was great.
And from a staffing perspective, it's really disappointing at times when they limit testimony to, the room's really full, so we're going to give everybody 30 seconds today. That is very, very disappointing. I have seen that before. It's not often. Normally they let you speak as long as you can. Sometimes they limit it to 5 minutes, 3 minutes. But when the room is packed, it is disappointing because that's all at the chair's discretion, how fast they want a committee to go by.
Yeah. Okay.
I think we might be ready for the next.
Very good. Yeah, let's do it.
All right, here's a quick overview of the steps we've had so far. Sponsor files a bill. The bill is referred to a committee. It has a hearing and it has a vote. I will quickly say, in between each of these steps, I could list 5 sub-steps. The sponsor has to go and ask for a hearing. The sponsor has to go and ask for a vote because those steps really have to happen for the next step to happen. But I don't want this to be 5 hours long, so this is a quick summary of what we got so far, and we can keep moving. So once your bill as a sponsor has passed a committee with a committee vote, the committee chair then has to turn in a slip of all the passed bills to the chamber secretary. So if you're in the House and your bill has passed your committees, the committee chair has to turn in a report to the floor. I don't know how it works exactly in the House, but in the Senate, at least, sometimes this is another instance where the committee chair can hold on to their report for weeks and weeks and weeks and not turn it into the floor for full debate. But once the committee report is turned into the floor, the entire chamber can debate your bill. And that is up to the discretion of the majority floor leader in each chamber. So in the House, the floor leader can choose, today we're going to go to bills 1, bills 10, and bills 100. They can bounce around, and if they don't like a bill, they can ignore it. In the Senate, however, bills have to be debated in order that they're turned in. So if bills 7, 10, and 11 were referred to the floor in that order, you have to go to 7 and 10 before you can get to bill 11. So that's another instance where the House is a little top heavy. The power shifts to the majority floor leader. He or she can bounce around as they want and ignore your bill if they want. And in the Senate, they cannot ignore your bill. They have to go in order. Once the bill is on the floor for perfection, that is when anyone can make alterations to your bill via an amendment. So if I see you misspelled a word or you missed a comma, I can have an amendment to fix that. If I want to add an entirely new provision, which is from my bill that I filed that hasn't moved forward yet, I can offer that as an amendment to make your bill larger and expand it. Amendments have to be germane to the topic, so I can't add school funding to a landfill bill or vice versa. It all has to be within the same topic. Topics can get pretty broad. Education is a pretty broad word. Transportation is a pretty broad word. Public safety can be, criminal laws and everything that encompasses that. But so if I want to preclude amendments from coming onto my bill, I'll make my title very specific. So my title could be funding for teachers K through 12 versus something more broad like education. On the House and Senate floor, there can also be substitutes. This is particularly true in the Senate, where you'll see Senate substitutes offered on the floor, where that can take a bill that's 1 page and make it 100 pages. So a Senate substitute is written by the sponsor. So if you have added 10 amendments to my bill and I hate it on the floor, I can say, you know what, let's throw those in the trash heap. I have a whole new Senate substitute. Or if the Senate has been filibustering for 2 days straight, I can come out with a whole new Senate substitute no one has seen at 2 a.m. and, hope some of the more controversial parts don't get picked up, or essentially a lot of these substitutes would have been compromised beforehand, but Senate substitutes can rewrite an entire bill in the middle of the process of perfection. Once all amendments have been offered, defeated, or accepted, that is when you vote for perfection to move the bill forward in the process, and that ends the whole floor debate. So perfection is the only time that bills can be changed on the floor, and it's when a lot of the substantive debate will occur. So I know that a lot.
Is that when filibusters will occur, Tyler?
Yes. So that is when filibusters will occur in the Senate. A senator will stand up and they can offer amendments at that time. But if the sponsor has just refused to meet with them or refused to concede on anything, an opposing senator can stand up and read a book and kill time. And as we said earlier, time is so important. So each minute, the further you get in the session is so important. So if we're here on May 1st and I have a senator who can filibuster for an hour, that is just time ticking away. And they might not want to prioritize your bill anymore after an hour. So this senator killed too much time. So that is when filibusters can occur. One of the times.
Got it.
Also, I noted there that the perfection vote isn't always recorded unless it's been requested. It's normally a voice vote.
And one thing I'd also note at the top about the committee chairs, there, and I know you've got all these other subcategories that we could go on for 5 hours or so, but isn't there usually like 2 committees that a bill will go to before it goes to the floor?
So good point. I did not put that in the slides, but I should have. That is true in the House. The House filters
yes.
bills through 2 committees. So you'll go to transportation, and then there's what's called a rules committee. So you got to pass both committees to get to the floor. In the Senate, that is not true. However, if there is an amendment offered on the floor that would increase the fiscal note or the cost of a bill to a certain amount, those bills, after they pass perfection, have to go to a fiscal oversight committee and vet the numbers financially before it can go to a final vote.
Yeah,
so that
okay.
is a good stipulation. There are multiple committees, especially in the House, that is true.
Got it. Okay.
We have a question from Karen. She raised her hand, so I'm gonna allow her to talk.
Okay.
Karen, if you want to take yourself off mute and ask your question, that's fine. Or maybe it was an accidental hand raise, which does happen.
Oh, sorry, it must have been.
Okay.
Okay. All right, we'll move you back. Okay. Well, if no one has any questions about that particular slide, we can move on.
And we can always come back to it later at the end as well.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. So
there's our current Speaker of the House, Dean Plocker.
Yes, man of the hour, Speaker Dean Plocker. That is pictured there.
Yeah.
So after your bill as a sponsor has been perfected, it's been, potentially amended, the perfection vote has gone through, a majority of the chamber has voted for your bill goes to one final vote of the entire chamber before it passes the chamber, and that is called a third read vote. At this point, the entire chamber can talk about it and, reflect on where you've been so far and review the steps that went into it, but no amendments can be offered during third read. It is cut and dry what was perfected. And then the third read vote is recorded. You'll actually see in this picture of Speaker Plocker in the background, all the greens are yes votes on in the House there. So everyone will vote yes, no. Sometimes you'll see people vote present if there may be a conflict of interest or some other reasons. But that is the final vote in the chamber. And once that chamber votes it out, your bill goes to the other chamber, so the House to the Senate or vice versa, and the process starts all over again. So if I pass a House bill from the entire House, your House bill then has to go to a Senate committee, and so on and so forth.
Right. Is there at that point, is there a priority given to a bill from a different chamber? Like, does it get a priority over like a bill that hasn't been heard within the chamber, or how would that, is that
Very
is that
good
considered?
question.
Yeah.
So the prioritization of your chamber typically comes from your majority floor leader. So if I'm in the Senate as the majority floor leader and we've had 30 bills come over from the House, but they haven't passed any of our Senate bills that we've sent over, I might choose to ignore all those House bills for a week or two. And that is where you'll see some of the conflicts within the building, differing priorities between the House and the Senate, between Republicans and Democrats, between the governor and the legislature, between specific personalities in the building. So I think that's a pretty good example. If the Senate hasn't passed any of our bills in the House, we're going to be in the House and we're going to complain about them not pass their bills. So you'll see a lot of I don't know, I guess you could say bickering towards the end of session on who did what wrong and didn't do something fast enough. You also could have a senator filibuster. A single senator could stand up at the beginning of the day and say, my bill, Bill 123, is over in the House, and this person, insert name here, is refusing to give it a hearing, and that's why I'm killing today. You will see specific callouts like that from time to time.
Got it. We have a question from Cheryl Markham. Thinking about Senator McCreary's bill, what are the benefits for filing a bill in the 400s when it clearly will not move?
So
Well,
I'll
look,
say, I
yeah,
would
go ahead,
say
Tyler. Go ahead.
I wouldn't say it clearly will not move because the pro tem typically refers bills in large batches early on. So you might have the pro tem decide, hey, every bill that was filed before January, I'm going to refer in the first month. I will say anything that is pre-filed has a shot of passage and shows some amount of care. If someone files something March 1st, they know that's not probably going to move at all. If someone files it December 15th, they care about that, they've put time into it. That is still relatively early in the process. So we are in the 400s now. I know that the number sounds large, but we'll probably end up in the 900s and bills that are filed until March. So I wouldn't say it has no shot.
And sometimes don't they have to come into Jefferson City to file in person?
Yes, they do. I believe, I don't remember the exact rules. I think staff may be able to wink, wink file for you if you're not able to come at a certain amount. But I do think they have to be there in person. They have to give their signature to file a bill. So
Yeah.
that's correct. A senator may have to travel from Southeast Missouri 4 hours to file a bill.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that Senator McCreary isn't, wasn't able to be there on the first day or the first week or whatever, but you never know. Something might have been going on and she wasn't able to get to Jefferson City from St. Louis early
Mhm.
enough. But I'd say probably the larger impediment to her bill is just the fact that she's in the minority. Right? I mean, that's going to be the biggest challenge to that bill, I would say. But I'd also say this, and this is not me having any insight onto Senator McCreary's thinking or her strategy, but there are a lot of pro utility bills that have been filed this year. There's a sense that there is going to be some utility bill legislation that moves quickly. I mentioned something about that Senator Searpoy's bills that were very high up, that those sound like his priority, sound like something that's going to have some juice to it. I mean, it's very possible that she could see, because she typically has a lot of skepticism towards pro utility bills. And it could be that she could see an opportunity to get her language added to certain bills. And maybe that's maybe that's going to be how she approaches things, potentially.
We've got a handful of slides. Let's try and
Yeah.
get through, and then we can continue some discussion. So here's another overview of everywhere we've been so far. Bills filed, referred, has a committee vote. It's perfected on the floor, has a third read vote, and then the bill heads to the opposite chamber, and then it must be referred to the opposite chamber's committee. So that's where we're at now. And then we've discussed this quite a bit. Bills can be amended on the floor. I will say a Senate bill passes the Senate, goes to the House adds new language that the Senate has never voted on before. That bill will have to go back to the Senate for a full vote if any changes are made by the opposite chamber. An interesting wrinkle that happens at times when the two chambers disagree with one another is what's called a conference committee. You'll see this most often with the budget bills, where the Senate supports, all these provisions and the House disagrees with them, or vice versa. We want something added or taken away. When the chambers cannot come to a consensus on what they want in a bill, the sponsor will go to the floor and say, Mr. Speaker, I request a conference committee on my bill 123 and request that insert requirement here. So you could say, I request the Senate recede from their position on this part of the bill. Or I request that the Senate agree to the House position, vice versa. It's when the two chambers cannot agree, then they go to a conference committee, which is set up with equal number senators and reps, still split up by party, so there's less minority members, but you need a majority of the members present to sign their name to whatever the conference committee agrees to. It's a super interesting process. There's a picture of it right here, where there's all senators and reps there. And they decide, yes, we want to sign our name to going to the House position or the Senate position, or I think at times they might even put a new position in there. Actually, let me correct myself. You cannot go to a new position. That was wrong.
Okay.
And then we discussed veto power quite a bit earlier. Here's incoming Governor Mike Kehoe. He formerly was lieutenant governor and formerly was a state senator. So if the legislature, the Senate and the House, you got your bill passed 20 steps and it finally passed, the governor at that point has the power to take it all away with a veto. And the legislature does have an opportunity to override with 2/3 vote in each chamber. But like James mentioned earlier, you don't see that very often when the party of the governor aligns with the party of the legislature. You'll see the governor cannot veto small parts of a larger bill. So if he agrees with 9 out of 10 parts in the bill, he's got to veto the entire thing and all of it dies. But that is different than budget bills where he can pick and choose. I want to cut this $1 million here and this $1 million here. He doesn't have to cut the entire budget.
Tyler, how often does that happen where a governor will veto a bill?
So I'd say on average there's 2 or 3 or 4 a year of just regular vetoes. You will see line item vetoes in the budget every year. The legislature passes, a certain $1 billion budget. This past year, Governor Parson vetoed a total of $1 billion in the summer, and that caught all these different items from across the budget, which had already passed. And he just with his stamp, he vetoed $1 billion in the summer. So the budget vetoes are very common. Vetoes of statutory bills, regular bills, it's not as common, but you'll see 2 or 3 or 4 a year. I think we may have 1 or 2 more here. Oh, here's a couple differences between the 2 chambers and their composition. The House has many more members, 163. When you're debating on the floor, you cannot speak until you have been called upon, and the Speaker of the House can ignore you. You'll see a lot of this with minority members where they raise their hands like these pictures here, and you never get called upon to speak. You never have an opportunity. Your speaking time limit is 15 minutes per topic. And then the majority leader can choose to cut off debate at any time with what is called a PQ motion. So that is one example of the House. And then the next slide, I'll tell you differences in the Senate. In the Senate, there's much less members. There's only 34. If you want to speak on any provision, the president pro tem or the lieutenant governor has to recognize you. They have to give you an opportunity to speak. They cannot ignore you. And then there is no time limit. So that is what creates the filibuster. So if someone wants to talk all night long, they can talk all night long. Nothing will stop them unless if the PQ motion is used, which is never in my time has it ever been used in the Senate, because it's considered what's called a nuclear option. If you choose to use a PQ in the Senate, there will be so much retaliation that ties up the chamber. Session becomes essentially over at that point. So people are so wary of using that nuclear option. You just don't see it in the Senate. And I have not seen it in my entire time staffing the Senate. So that's broadly the difference between the 2 chambers. And I think after that, we're opened up to questions. That was a lot all at once to fill it in. So James, you have any comments?
Me? Oh, no, I mean, I think that's, listen, that's as encompassing as you're going to get for 50 minutes. It's one of those things that if you have specific questions about specific bills, I mean, we try to mean, right now, Renew Missouri is kind of trying to go through, I think, like close to 40 bills that we've kind of identified as stuff that we're interested in either supporting, opposing, or just monitoring. And we'll try to figure out which ones that we want to have public positions on, which ones that we believe would be helpful for the public to weigh in on. And trying to kind of keep people informed about that process as we go along. There's going to be a lot of questions that probably get raised during session, so we just kind of hope that this is something that you can just that you can just kind of have some food for thought and get you thinking about it. So yes, it wasn't nearly so. Yeah, a couple months ago, myself and Emily Weber, our Kansas City coordinator, also state rep, did an overview of last year's session, and Emily Weber and we had a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty yeah, but it'll be really wait till you see our summary next year. It'll be fun too.
Oh, I'm sure there'll be, 100 new headlines and pieces of drama we could go over. I sort of did nuts and bolts here.
Yeah. I don't know if fun's the right word. It'll be an adventure, I guess. But yeah, again, you all should have our email addresses. We will send out the recording for this. We just want to thank you we're at 12:55 now. We're way over our time. We're 2 minutes over our time. But if you do have anything you want to ask about, just email us. Call me. It's at the bottom of my email address. And we would love to talk to you about it. So thanks again for your interest in